All right. It's still morning, right? Good morning, everybody. How y'all doing? Yeah, all right. Look, thank you for coming to this event. I'd like to also bring up the panelists, because I'm going to set a little bit of context before we get into this, but it'll be good to have them up here acting like they care what I'm saying, don't you think? Yeah, that would be right. Good test for them. So, first of all, I'd like to invite up Jesse Proudman, our CTO of Blue Box. Jesse, come on up. Thank you. Thank you. Jason McGee, IBM Fellow, VP, CTO of Cloud Foundational Services. Jason, and then Chip Childers, the Vice President of the Cloud Foundry Foundation. Chip, thank you. And of course, Mary Mount Pleasant, Senior Cloud Advisor and Architect here at IBM. Mary, thank you. Thank you very much.
I get to sit at the table.
Sure. Oh my gosh. Who doesn't want to be a superhero? Raise your hand if you don't want to be a superhero. No, you do. You know, it's funny. I asked that question once, and I said, "Who doesn't want to be a superhero?" One person rose their hand. I said, "Well, why is that?" "I want to be a villain." Oh, all right, but look, and it was Jason who wanted to be the villain. Look, let me tell you, we are living in the most amazing kind of technology-fueled business renaissance, right? You know, all of these innovations that we are talking about here, all these cool demos, are being driven by cloud, mobile, Internet of Things, analytics, data. And what's driving those technologies forward are not just companies like IBM and our partners and clients, but what's happening in the open communities, what's happening in the open source world. Okay? I don't care if you're a CIO, a director, a manager. Your folks are using open technologies. Your folks are participating in these communities, and they want to build on a cloud that is built on these open communities. All right? And what we're going to try to do in this panel here and dig into is, what is the recipe for becoming an open source superhero? What do you need to do? And it's all about focusing on code, community, and culture. And geez, we've been doing this at IBM, Nancy, for a long time. I mean, if you remember back, you all remember the early days of the interweb, early 90s, right? Standards like HTML, XML, Linux, all of these things, Java, Eclipse, all of these amazing things that kind of started this revolution of standards and open source. But, you know, the way things are done now are very different than those days. Does anyone know why HTML was created? Don't be shy, just raise your hand. Yes, I know you know, but that doesn't count. It was created to disseminate physics information. The first XML DTD, the thing that was the use case for XML that all your developers use, was the mathematical markup language. These are beautiful technologies. We use HTML today to process transactions, to do e-business, okay? What's different about open source in those days and open source now is that you all are actually driving the use cases. And think about the art of the possible. Think about what can potentially happen with all of these centers of gravity that we're building together in communities since you are involved. I mean, we live in an amazing world now, and we didn't even think about it. We were trying to disseminate physics information. And now everyone's using HTML, HTTP on their phones. What's going to happen? What's the innovation that's going to occur? It is mind-bending. So we've been out trying to ensure that when it comes to cloud, mobile, data, and analytics, that you have the proper centers of gravity, the right open source, okay, so that we can flourish and do great things. But it's also not just about big centers of gravity. You need to terraform. You need to give space for things, for stardust, right, to become planets. So how you participate in these communities are really important as well. Okay? Not all open source is created equal. It might not have a license that allows you to go into production. It might not have an ecosystem which is responsive to your requirements. It might not allow you to have your developers push code back into it. It might not have broad industry adoption. So it's really important as you look at this kind of renaissance we live in and all of these technologies that we're going to get into, that you choose the right ones and that you choose the ones that have the right governance model behind it. And so what I'm going to do is set the stage for some of the conversation we're going to have. Some of the open technologies that we're going to dig into, these are topics that your developers are into. These are topics you really need to understand. And when you look at a cloud, any cloud, am I standing in front? When you look at any cloud, right, it better be built on these open technologies from the inside out. Because if not, you will be building a dead-end cloud. You will not be able to integrate. You won't be able to do hybrid. You won't have consistent programming models, whether you're local, dedicated, or public, or starburst across clouds. So the first one is OpenStack. And this is an amazing story. OpenStack is the world's ubiquitous infrastructure as a service platform. Right, Jesse? I mean, you've been there since the beginning.
Yeah.
The first conference we went to had 75 people, and that included a dog. We just got back from Tokyo. 7,000 folks were at an open source conference in Tokyo. And this is data center people, all right? The infrastructure is built on OpenStack. That is the open source infrastructure. But then you get, Chip, into platform for the people. How do you build your applications? Assuming that you have compute, storage, and network magically happening for you underneath. How do you quickly build those applications? Cloud Foundry. For us, that's Bluemix. We run the world's largest production scale Cloud Foundry environment. Okay? We were there from the beginning. We helped sponsor and create the foundation with our partners back in December 9th, it was, right, of last year. And we've grown to 50 folks involved. That's just unbelievable. Such a short amount of time. So we'll get into Cloud Foundry. But it's not just the infrastructure, it's also the middleware, the runtimes. Anyone know what Node is? JavaScript on the server, right? Yeah, you guys are doing that. Well, guess what? We helped bring Node to open governance. Node wasn't an open source project. And in fact, it was controlled by a small little company that did weird things with the licenses. Imagine your enterprise client, you're running your UIs on Node, and all of a sudden the license changed. Now what? And you've got a deployed mobile app, banking app. You're completely in trouble, or you're open to litigation. That's why it's so important to choose the right open technologies, okay? And then, of course, containers. Who doesn't love containers? Anyone know about Docker? Heard that Docker buzzword? You love whales, right, Jason?
I love whales. I love whales.
Who doesn't love whales? It would be hashtag not cool to love whales. You would trend the other way in Twitter, right? Well, guess what? We've been moving this container technology, okay, into open ecosystems with something called the Cloud Native Computing Foundation. We stood up on stage with Google, Jason, at the event at OSCON, and we launched a foundation to build out standardized containers in a microservice model for cloud native computing applications. So OpenStack for the infrastructure, platform for the people, Cloud Foundry, containers and microservices. But there's something missing because we're living in an API economy, right? All of these demos that you see are APIs. You live in multiple speed IT. You talk to your clients about that. We'll get into that. How do you connect a Z system, a system of record running Z Linux, right, from the mothership to, say, Cloud Foundry or to a container? You need APIs. So just last week, we partnered up with a bunch of folks, and we launched the Open API Initiative, which is based on something called Swagger. And trust me, your developers are developing with Swagger. Not just Swagger, but actually Swagger as the way of defining their APIs. Okay? So for us, it is about building this architecture. This is architecturally how our cloud is built. Infrastructure with OpenStack, platform with containers and Foundry, software solutions, APIs, all built on an open cloud architecture that is consistent, open by design, one user experience, one cloud. That's what we're building out in the industry, and that's what we've built out in our own cloud. And you can do it too. You heard Rachel talk about it. We're going to get some examples from you about clients who are going down this journey. Don't be scared. You can start at any entry point you like, and there is a method behind the madness. In fact, Rachel and us launched an open source method for how do you do essentially DevOps, right? And act like a startup, but scale to the enterprise. Because it's all great when you're hanging out in Manhattan, 10 people doing development, or in Silicon Valley. The world's not just Manhattan and Silicon Valley, right? You got to be able to scale pair programming, squads, pull requests. How do you do that? And we made it really, really prescriptive here. So, at the end of the day, if you follow those rules around code, community, and culture, you'll become the superhero of choice, whatever your preferred superhero is. Right? I know that people are particular about that. So, with that, we're going to get into the panel, and we're going to have a discussion. Okay, and I got a couple of questions I'd like to ask. I'm going to start with Jesse. Well, first of all, we got to move the chairs.
Yeah, we're going to redeploy these chairs.
Yeah, we forgot to move. Yes, sorry. We're going to move the chairs closer.
Oh, we're going over there.
Do I need that one? Do you want to?
Okay. I'm going to start with Jesse. You guys okay? You're with me so far? Is that good context? I didn't get a round of applause. Can I get one, please? Thank you. As you said, I'm very shy when it comes to... It's early. You got to schedule these a little later. 11 o'clock is when I'm getting up. All right. Jesse, OpenStack, infrastructure as a service. Can you tell me a little bit about what happened in Tokyo and perhaps more importantly, you know, where are we moving forward and momentum?
Yeah, absolutely. So who's familiar with OpenStack in the room? Okay, largely the majority of the room. So OpenStack's been around for 5+ years. Certainly, to some extent, the whipping boy of the tech media, right? I think the project has struggled from a reliability perspective in its early years, and that perception has kind of carried through as it's evolved. In Tokyo, we released Liberty, which I believe was the 11th or 12th release. And the conversation really began to change. On stage, we saw companies like Yahoo Japan, who runs 60 billion active page views a month on their production OpenStack cluster. They're getting up and they're talking about what they're doing with OpenStack. We saw Walmart in Vancouver talk about their production deployment. And so we've reached this tipping point where no longer is OpenStack a science experiment, but OpenStack is a proven technology with international scale and with companies that are building their next generation applications on top of it. Much of the conversation in Tokyo was around containers and was around networking, which obviously containers have become in the last 18 months a very important part of modern infrastructure. And networking has always been a big focus of OpenStack. And so the focus moving forward is on bringing containers in as a first-class citizen into the OpenStack project and on stability of the networking platform. And I think we'll continue to see in the coming summits, the next one's in Atlanta, and then Barcelona, more and more production use stories, how customers are using this technology in their business to move their next generation applications forward.
Yeah. I mean, we've got over 400 IBMers contributing in the community in OpenStack. Now, we consume it into our platforms. We're not open source leeches, right? A leech is someone who just uses it but doesn't give it back. We give back as well.
And I think we contributed 1.2 million lines of code to the Liberty release.
So, and yeah, that's just, it's amazing. Chip, Cloud Foundry is, last I saw, the fastest growing in terms of how fast it's scaled up. Open source project in a long time, I think in history. So can you tell us about what's going on with Cloud Foundry? What's hot there?
Sure. So as you mentioned, the foundation itself was announced, I believe, back in 2014, and IBM worked with a number of other vendor partners to build up the appropriate governance model for the foundation. And myself and those of us that actually work for Cloud Foundry as a foundation, this vendor-neutral, independent organization, we all started in January of this year. And what we've seen since January till now has just been amazing. So we've just crossed the 50-member mark in terms of foundation membership. And what's really important to me there is that we've got not just the vendors, right? Not just IBM, and I love IBM quite a bit. We have a lot of users. Specifically, we have users within the financial services industry, the industrial internet, I mean heavy industry, right? General Electric, Bosch, We've got organizations like Siemens looking at how do they use Cloud Foundry as a substrate for
Bank of New York Mellon is a
BNY Mellon,
yeah.
Bloomberg, Citi. So all of these organizations are they're really looking at Cloud Foundry as a way to solve the problems that they're running into daily within all their application teams. I think Bluemix is a great manifestation of a way to solve these issues. And the problem is that it's impossible to maintain sustainable competitive advantage today. And so Cloud Foundry comes at the technology part of solving for that and saying that you need to be able to iterate very, very quickly, and you need to have a lot of app centricity to move forward. So we've had great collaboration across the vendors that are in part of our ecosystem, part of our community, but we've also had a lot of user organizations step up and say, we're going to join special interest groups that are going to help drive industry-specific requirements. We're going to join the general user feedback cycles that we've put in place. It's just been outstanding.
I mean, we've done a lot, but a lot really goes to you and how you are running the foundation. I mean, this meritocracy, the governance you have around it allows all of the vendors to participate based on code contribution, and it allows everyone to participate in an ecosystem. And that's what you want. If you kind of saw some of the demos on Bluemix, all these beautiful tiles, right? You've got a lot of IBM tiles, right? Watson, WebSphere, Liberty, whatever, right? But you've also got all the open source tiles, as well. And it's supported by the communities, right? So you have a palette of colors that you can paint from, right? And that only works, that ecosystem only works in a truly open governed way. And you guys are doing a great job with that.
One of the things I think is most interesting about our approach there is that a lot of the practices that you want to embody within your internal teams are things like how do you do paired programming? How are you looking at your development as an agile process so you can iterate very, very quickly? We've actually embodied that in this multi-vendor process of creating open source software. So we'll be sitting there looking at IBM engineers that are on the same floor as other organizations that are participating in the building of the software. And we really do practice what we expect companies to then also practice when using Cloud Foundry.
That's a very good point. Jason.
Yeah.
Containers.
Yeah.
It's interesting because, Jason, he looks young, but he's been around too, And this service-oriented, you're a little younger than me, not much. You remember the service-oriented architecture world, right? It was beautiful. We're out building out reusable services, APIs. A lot of us, who running our businesses did that, but we forgot something. We forgot about deploying operations, right? We kind of missed that little piece. And what has happened with cloud is it allows us as computer scientists, as technologists, to give another run at this, right? To actually, and by the way, this is the history of computer science. We're always improving, right? Always making things better. And here we are now with this notion of development operations, and it manifested in this idea of containers and microservices. Can you tell us a little bit about the objectives of this newly formed Cloud Native Computing Foundation, what we're doing?
Yeah, sure. So first off, maybe containers has just burst onto the scene in this incredible way over the last years. How many of you know how old containers are as a technology? Any ideas? Like 5 years, 2 years, 10 years? Yeah, over 10 years, right? Not a new technology. The heart of containers is technology that's been evolving over many years in Linux through the contribution of IBM and Google and Red Hat and many other companies. But what really, I think, threw it over the edge was that connection between an API and the deployment model that allows you to rapidly iterate in the deployment of that API. And so, the Docker guys a couple of years ago, I think, were able to take this idea of containers and really make it easy, make it consumable, make it something that the average developer who is not a Linux kernel expert could adopt and leverage in their applications. And from that simplification came this explosion of adoption as people started to leverage containers as a fundamental component of how they build apps. And a component that's embedded in a lot of places, like Cloud Foundry's execution model under the covers is all containers. It's always been containers. Many platform environments have been container-based environments because it's a very efficient, rapid way to deploy and manage code. What I think had been lacking was how do we do this together? Right? How do we collaborate together as an industry around containers
How do we evolve that in an open way together? We had open source. We had people contributing to that open source, but we didn't have the right governance structure around that technology. And so 2 really interesting things happened in the last 6 months, I guess, in the container space that I really think will bring containers on par with the conversation we're having around Cloud Foundry and OpenStack in having an open governance model around containers. The first was the Open Container Initiative, which is an effort under the auspices of the Linux Foundation to really standardize what does a container runtime look like and what is a container image. Like the most basic building blocks that defines what a container is can now be defined in a standard way through a community process with the right governance model. And then the second thing that happened is the Cloud Native Computing Foundation, which Angel mentioned, which has a little bit bigger mission to look at how do we build modern cloud-native applications? How do we build microservices? How do we build for cloud? And what are the components around the basic idea of a container that you need to build those apps successfully? How do you do deployment and orchestration? How do you do scale? How do you do service discovery? How do you do networking and storage and state management in this kind of modern cloud-native way? And I think those 2 foundations and the efforts that they represent will really transform how we can all work to make containers the foundation for modern applications going forward.
You kind of brought up an interesting point, because here we have 3 very important centers of gravity: OpenStack, containers, and Foundry. And if you look at it carefully, the actual foundations are members of each other's foundations, right? And the reason is that in each of these, we're not going to reinvent networking. We're going to leverage OpenStack networking. We're not going to reinvent your container models. So from a programming model perspective, we are actually creating a coherent platform across these centers, each of them specializing in their area, but reusing where it makes sense. Now,
yeah, and you see that already, even in the last month, in very concrete ways. Like the Cloud Foundry Foundation has started to adopt Runc as the standard container runtime. In OpenStack, we have new projects that are doing things like linking networking in Docker to Neutron networking in OpenStack so that you can have one networking plane. So they're already coming together in very interesting ways.
And I think one of the other interesting points here is how fast the rise of containers has been, and in its relative lifespan of popularity, how fast the foundation was created. Right? You look at OpenStack, it took a number of years, A, to gain popularity, and B, for the foundation to be formed. Yet, with the Open Container Initiative and with the Cloud Native Compute Foundation, those initiatives started very, very quickly. And I find it fascinating to watch how fast these new technologies are being adopted inside enterprises, inside companies that are writing next-generation technologies. Like Docker is now part of production deployments in thousands of companies, and it wasn't here 2 years ago. Right? The foundation wasn't here 2 years. So the cycle has
much faster,
sped up much faster.
Yeah. Which is a great segue to how do you be successful? So that was the geek portion. Now you guys who aren't geeks are like, geeks go to sleep. Look, we all need to be geeks and non-geeks, all right? So if you categorize yourself as one or the other, you're doing the wrong job. You got to have these T-shaped skills, right? So let's talk about client success. And let's start, Mary, with how. The how behind, how do you get started? How do you do this?
Okay. So in my role, I work a lot with different clients. And the one thing I've noticed across the board is that culture trumps technology every time. And by that, I mean that picking which OpenStack tools you want to use and figuring out the order that you want to use them in is relatively easy compared to changing the culture of an entire organization. So, I mean, for the last 2 decades, we have put the guru on a pedestal, the person that can do performance tuning or configuration or Java development, right? And now we're saying to them, well, those are good skills, but we value your ability to collaborate. We value your ability to go across disciplines. So we're asking them to change the way they work, but we're also asking them fundamentally to change their view of themselves. And then we're wondering why they're resisting, right? So a lot of the companies that I'm working with are going to hackathons, and hackathons are exciting because it gives large enterprises an opportunity to demonstrate that they can do startup and think like a startup, do startup technologies. And they come up with innovative ideas, and it's great. And then there's this pause. Well, this is great, but locking all my developers in a room and throwing pizza under the door is not a sustainable model.
It is for me. I'm kidding. No, I'm just joking.
For a while.
Well, it
work
works
a
for a little
I'm
while,
easy.
but most enterprises are large,
Sure.
geographically dispersed
You're right.
organizations. They have stovepipes of organizational silos. So you need to figure out a way to get these different groups to start working together. So the garage method, which is open, or if you want to go to a garage and take advantage of that or get some of those folks to come to you, is one way of jump-starting this. And it takes best practices that we learned within IBM. It takes best practices from design thinking and DevOps and puts this on a platform where you can try this out and really accelerate it.
You know, I think the interesting piece there is it's not just the developers that need to change. You think about the way applications are being developed today and the types of technologies that are being used, it affects the entire organization. So compliance is another big area inside organizations, change management. All of these pieces need to be adapted and updated to match this new way of application development.
Yeah, I mean, this is a really good point. You know, application development now is a team sport. There's CMOs involved, line of business is involved, service, support, sales, development, right? You use this approach we call design thinking. You do a garage method to get an MVP, and then you scale it to the enterprise. In fact, we've been doing this to ourselves, I guess, for the past couple of years. And we're now, you know, in our cloud unit, have literally thousands of developers broken out into squads, doing pair programming, rotating across the system, gaining skills, doing pull requests. In other words, think about this. Imagine you're in a bank and you're building an app, and you need to change something on the back-end transaction system, the Z system. How long does that take you? It takes you a while because you have to get two directors to talk to each other, to do some relation. It doesn't even happen. They don't even talk to each other. Well, guess what? You guys are useless because your developers can change the code, put a test case, do a pull request, and the person on the Z side, if they like it, accepts it and moves on. And you don't have to be involved. That is what's starting to happen now. It sounds funny, but that's what's starting to happen now, right? You know, a Mongo API access to a vSAN file. Holy cow, right? That is power, right? And that's kind of where we're headed with a lot of this stuff.
I was just going to add to that, because I think you're absolutely right, Mary, that culture change is such a big part of it. And it's interesting to me how other technology approaches, like microservices, everyone loves to talk about microservices. A lot of people can't say the word containers without saying microservices somewhere in the same sentence. A lot of people think that's a technology thing, but in reality, microservices is about solving that culture problem. It's about how do we organize as teams to be able to run at the pace that we need to run at and collaborate together in a way that allows us to go fast. So it's really a people thing. Microservices is about how do people work together in order to run fast, and how does the application architecture and technology support those people working together in that new way.
I think one way that we tend to get very stymied in organizations is presuming that there's some magic that's out there that's going to speed us up, that's going to solve for our problems with iterating. But what I would say is, with every organization that I've spoken with in the last several years that's starting to do this transformation, they're discovering that the individuals that are already there have an enormous amount of untapped potential, right? So we're up here talking about technology, and technology is certainly both a cause of the need to reinvent the way you work, right? But it's at the same time, it provides some solutions, and that's where platforms that then provide constraints but let you iterate really quickly is very useful. It's actually about unlocking the potential of your people that are already there. Don't forget that there's a lot of knowledge that exists. There's a lot of possibility, and I think a lot of pent-up demand to actually help your companies.
That's a really good point. Technology helps us think differently about what we can actually offer, right? It's an amazing thing. All right, so let's do another pivot here, because I don't fail fast, I pivot. You talk about failing fast. DevOps joke, right? You guys didn't get it.
I laughed.
You laughed.
I laughed.
Come on, guys. So it's sometimes difficult to just use open source, right? Downloading code, building out a team of people, to support, service, manage, whatever, open sources. Maybe you're not in the business of creating middleware, right? So, there's things that we do in IBM to let you leverage the pure open source, but also make it easier for you. So what I'd like to do is talk a little bit about some of the things that we're doing, right, both in the community and also in our offerings, to make it easier for you all to consume and leverage this technology. So Jesse, let's start with OpenStack. How can people get access to OpenStack and IBM?
Yeah, so before I start with OpenStack, I like to talk about cloud and like what cloud is. And from my perspective, if you look at the rise of the cloud ecosystem over the last 7 years or so, ultimately, cloud is about an experience. It's about an SLA. It's about an API. It's not about what software you use. It's not about what hardware you buy. It's not about where that infrastructure sits. It's all about that experience. And if we look at OpenStack's origin, that technology platform was looking to solve a problem. It was looking to say, how do I bring the power of, at that time, Amazon Web Services into my own data center? How do I give my developers the same access to infrastructure that they can get in a public cloud? And that problem originally was solved as software. And so about 2 years into the OpenStack evolution, this notion of an OpenStack distribution was born. And so in the same way that you had Linux originally, and you could go and get the source code, and you could compile it yourself, and people loved doing that, and they'd tweak all the little settings, and they'd make it work just the way they wanted, but it would take days or weeks or months, and there's that one person that had all the knowledge about that system. The Linux distribution fixed that for Linux by making those technologies much more consumable inside the enterprise. The OpenStack distribution was designed to do something very similar. It said, how can we take a very complicated set of technologies and make them consumable for an end user? The challenge was that OpenStack, as a cloud offering, was very different than Linux. You think about Linux as a system, it's a single system. When that system fails, you may have an outage of a database or a server, and you can fix that, or you can design around that in a highly available architecture. When your cloud fails, that can take down your entire business. And so the blast radius of what you're installing, what you're managing, has gone up dramatically. And so at 3 in the morning, when that Linux system goes down, you can call up the distribution maker and ask for support, and they can try to help you fix it. At 3 in the morning, when your cloud goes down, phone call is not going to cut it. You've got to be able to actually operate and fix this problem. And so the distributed systems that power these cloud architectures, they're much more complicated than software. And so IBM, I think, if you look at that strategy, has recognized that customers are not in the business of running infrastructure. Customers are in the business of differentiating their business by developing new applications, differentiating their business in software. And so if IBM can take all of the complexity that exists in the infrastructure layer, the platform layer, containers, and deliver that as a service, whether it's in a public environment on SoftLayer, a dedicated environment that belongs to a single customer on SoftLayer, or a local environment in a customer's data center alongside their existing implementation, and run that implementation in the same way that they run the public side, removing all of the complexity, the operational burden from the customer, and just giving them that cloud experience, then we can take cloud and make it functional across all of those locations. And I think it's a unique perspective in the market. Many of the other vendors in the ecosystem are saying, yes, we believe in cloud, but you have to come to us. Or yes, we believe in cloud, but we're going to give you software that becomes your problem. From what I saw going through the acquisition into IBM 5 months ago, IBM was the only company in the marketplace that really recognized the value of this as-a-service model in those 3 local, dedicated, public models. And that was really exciting to me. It's exciting to be a part of now.
Thank you. So, Jason, when you look at containers and Cloud Foundry and what we're doing in Bluemix, what are we doing to help folks be more productive, secure, et cetera, around these environments?
Yeah, first I'll reinforce Jesse's comment. I mean, I think if you look at the platform and container space, we're following exactly the same strategies. How do we deliver this stuff as operational services? If you look at what we talked about this morning with the relay as a mechanism for us to manage in local, it's all about how do we deliver this as a service that people can use and leverage and focus on their applications. I think the other dimension that where we're adding value is how do we bring all these pieces together? How do you bring together the collection of technologies that make up these platforms? How do we take the latent potential in something like Cloud Foundry and fill it with capability that developers can use, right? It has some good base ideas of services and service binding and composition, which is really interesting if you have a lot of content available to compose and bind together. And so, I think part of what we've done is fill that palette with capability. I think even if you look at how we've approached the open communities, a lot of our contributions, our technical contributions, are about how do we evolve that technology to be appropriate for the kinds of workloads we interact with you on every day. You look at what we've been doing in Docker. One of the first things we did in the Docker ecosystem is go look at things like security, right? And how do we improve security within a container environment? So if you're actually running multiple applications or multiple tenants in a container environment, you get the right level of isolation and security between those tenants. And so we've kind of taken that production grade mentality and said, how do we apply that to these technologies, evolve the base technologies to be appropriate for the workloads, and then deliver those technologies in a consumable and consistent fashion. And how do we link, OpenStack and Docker and containers and Cloud Foundry together into a coherent platform that a developer could approach and use without having to kind of understand and see the seams between.
I think that's a really key point around enterprise requirements, right? So if you look at open source communities, the power of an open source community is that you've got developers from all over the world contributing code. The challenge with that is that they're developers all over the world contributing code who don't necessarily understand the requirements that an enterprise has in their day-to-day operations. IBM has 100 years of understanding those requirements and can take that expertise into its engineering base and contribute those pieces into the upstream projects. And that's what we've been doing over the last couple of years. And I think it's a really key part of the strategy.
Absolutely. Okay, so I'm going to ask you all two more sets of questions. Okay, the first one is get started. So how do I get started? So, Chip, if someone wants to get involved in Cloud Foundry, other than calling you or texting you this directly, which, 1-800-GO-CHIP, text them. No, it's not enough digits.
I'd be fascinated to see what response.
How do you get started with Cloud Foundry?
So first and foremost, I'd say get started by signing up for an account with a provider like Bluemix, because you really need to experience how Cloud Foundry operates to understand if you want to get involved further. Make sure that it gives you some business value. Put a developer on it. Have them kind of iterate very, very quickly. And then I think there's two different ways you can look at getting involved in the Cloud Foundry. I actually call it a movement at this point. We've got so much momentum. The first is you can think about what are the things that your organization needs, or what are the things that organizations like you might need out of that solution, and join one of our special interest groups that would be vertically aligned. I think that's a very, very powerful opportunity. We've got them going right now for financial services and industrial internet, and actually we expect that national governments are going to start talking specifically about how they mold Cloud Foundry to support them. So that's one. I would say the other thing is if you're interested in just learning more, we're offering a series of summits. We have a Cloud Foundry Summit that occurred in Santa Clara earlier this year. We doubled the attendance from the year before that as the foundation took it over. I just got back from Berlin. We had a fantastic event there, and we'll be headed to Shanghai 2nd and 3rd of December, and then we'll be back at Santa Clara in March. So that's a great place to actually sit down, meet people who are building the technology, meet other users of the technology, actually discuss how it needs to evolve to support you. And I'd say the last opportunity, and the reason I leave this for the last, is that it's not necessarily the role or the goal of every business that would be sitting here to contribute to the upstream. That's incredibly valuable if you do, and we'd love it. We'd love you to participate, and you're welcome to do so. But I think that what's important is that the economy, what's emerged from our collective economy is that we have organizations that want to productize, that are spending a lot of effort building, and they're actually putting the bulk of that effort in for you. So you can join us, join the development community. We have a program that's designed, we call it the Cloud Foundry Dojo program. It's designed to take a potential contributor from just learning about the system all the way to being a full-time dedicated committer on the project in somewhere between 6 to 8 weeks. That is a possibility, but there's a long-term commitment.
In fact, we're sponsoring one of the dojos in Raleigh. So,
that's right. That's right.
That's awesome. All right, Jason, IBM Containers. What do we do? How to get started?
The easy answer is Bluemix.net. It's one of the great things about cloud. Go just sign up and start using it. I think one of the amazing things about Bluemix right now is all the technologies we've been talking about that form the architecture of cloud are all available via Bluemix right now. Okay. You can get Docker, you can do Cloud Foundry, you can get access to OpenStack in one place. My personal recommendation is get serious about it. Pick a project, pick an actual problem that you have to go solve, and use these technologies to go solve it. Don't look at it theoretically, like pick something, get in there and do it.
All right, Mary.
So I think the first step is acceptance. Acceptance that this is the new world we live in, and that you're going to have an enterprise that is going to have multi-speed IT. So you're going to have a fast lane, and those guys are going to be, or ladies are going to be going as fast as they possibly can, adopting open technology and God knows what else. You may also have a slow lane, and maybe a lane in the middle. So, take the learnings from the fast lane and push it down into the other lanes. Let each lane go the pace that they want to go at, and then establish some rules of the road. And get a Bluemix account.
Jesse.
Yeah, I want to echo what was just said around picking a project. So when we interact with customers, we call this "I have a cloud, now what" problem. Without a use case, any of this technology is pointless. And so figuring out what you're going to do, that first step, how you're going to adapt culturally, what that first initiative will be, I think is really key. And then once you know that, you can pick the right technology to implement it on top of. From a Blue Box perspective, I think the way we've deployed OpenStack, and I'll talk to it a little bit later this afternoon, but it's an as-a-service model. So we have it dedicated in SoftLayer, and we have it local in your data center. And we found that many customers just simply want an OpenStack environment that they begin to try to work with and figure out how they can fit it into their workflow. The neat thing is that we offer that as a service at a monthly price point that's under $10,000 a month for a pool of compute resources. So it's a very accessible way to get started without having to go hire a team of 20 OpenStack engineers and pick which distribution and buy a bunch of hardware. You just get an environment that works, and we can do that in any of the 27 global or now 30 global SoftLayer data centers. So it's a great way to just get started with OpenStack without having to worry about OpenStack.
Okay. All right, last question, really quick. 1 to 5 words. And I didn't prep you with this. When you think about the future of a cloud that is built open by design, like the IBM cloud, think about the apps. Think about what people will be able to do, how they'll be able to innovate. Try to describe that future in 1 to 5 words. Jesse.
You pulled this on me in
yeah, but you,
in
so
Tokyo,
you should know the answer because you already answered it.
I called a rain check, and then you made me do it anyway. I'm going to call a rain check again. I got to brainstorm on this one.
Okay, think about it. Jason.
Painful.
Painful. Okay.
In 1 to 5 words, I'd use 2. Continuous innovation.
Continuous innovation. Very good. Mary.
You're able to achieve.
Egalitarian.
Egalitarian.
Now
I'm going to go with awesome sauce. So thank you very much, folks.
Is that 1 or 2?
Right. It's cultural transformation.
Cultural transformation. All right. Thank you, Jesse. Thank you, Chip, Jason, Mary, Jesse. Please, a round of applause to our panelists. Thank you so much for paying attention.